I arrived at St. Gertrude's Convent on a bleak November evening, the sky bruised with the last light of day. The sprawling Gothic structure loomed ahead, its darkened windows like the vacant eyes of a corpse. I had been sent by the diocese to document the convent's history, as the remaining sisters had dwindled to only 5 elderly nuns. Soon, the doors would close forever, and the church wanted a record of its existence before it was left to ruin. Sister Mary Benedict, the Mother Superior, greeted me at the heavy oak doors. Her face was a map of time, her eyes piercing. "You'll be staying in the East Wing," she said. "It's quiet there. You'll have your solitude." I followed her down dimly lit corridors, where ancient paintings of long-dead abbesses watched my every move. The air smelled of old wax and mildew, the scent of forgotten things. "The convent has a long history," Sister Benedict murmured. "Some of it best left undisturbed." That night, I lay in my cold bed, listening to the wind howl through the trees. Sleep came fitfully, fractured by the creaking of floorboards and the rustle of unseen things in the darkness. At some point, I awoke to the sound of whispering outside my door. I sat up, heart hammering. The voices were low, hurried, prayers muttered in Latin. I crept to the door, pressing my ear against the wood. The words were strange, fevered. I opened the door, but the corridor was empty. Over the next few days, I immersed myself in the convent's history. I found old records in the musty archives, names of sisters long past, dates of birth and death, and something else. Something unsettling. There was a name that appeared repeatedly. Sister Magdalena. Unlike the others, no date of death was listed beside hers, only a single, ominous note, excommunicated. Sealed away. Curiosity gripped me. I asked Sister Benedict about her, but her expression darkened. "We do not speak of Sister Magdalena," she said. "Let the past remain buried." But I couldn't. That night, armed with a candle, I ventured into the basement. The air was thick with dust, the stone walls damp with centuries of neglect. I found a rusted iron door at the end of the passage, its surface covered in deep scratches, as if someone, or something, had clawed at it from within. Terror crawled up my spine. I reached for the latch. "Do not open that door." The voice came from behind me. I whirled around to find Sister Agnes, the frailest of the nuns, staring at me with wide, terrified eyes. "Go back to your room," she whispered. "Pray for your soul." That night, I dreamt of Magdalena. She stood at the foot of my bed, her habit in tatters, her face obscured by a black veil. Whispers filled my mind, a chorus of voices speaking in tongues. Her hand reached for me, long, bony fingers stained with something dark. I woke up screaming. The next day, Sister Agnes was found dead in the chapel, her rosary clutched so tightly that the beads had left bruises in her palms. The other nuns took it as a sign, locking themselves in their rooms, leaving me alone in the halls of the dying convent. I knew then that I had to leave, but something held me there, a pull, a question that needed answering. That night, I returned to the basement. The iron door was open. The room beyond was a small stone chamber, the air rank with decay. Chains lay in a heap on the floor, and in the center of the room stood an altar. Candles, long extinguished, had melted into grotesque shapes. Atop the altar was a book, bound in cracked leather, the pages filled with Latin scripture and symbols that made my head ache to look at. And then, the whispering returned. I turned slowly, my breath caught in my throat. Sister Magdalena stood in the doorway, her veil no longer hiding her face. Her eyes were hollow pits, her mouth twisted into something not meant for a human countenance. She opened her arms, and the shadows of the room grew long, reaching for me, pulling me toward her embrace. I ran. I do not know how I escaped, only that I found myself outside the convent, gasping for breath beneath the sickly moonlight. The convent was abandoned the next day. The nuns vanished, leaving no trace of their departure. I left the town, never speaking of what I had seen. Years later, I searched for records of St. Gertrude's convent. There were none. No history, no mention in the church's archives. As if it had never existed. But sometimes, in the dead of night, I hear the whispering again.
I can't sleep at night. I don't know when it started. Maybe a month ago. Maybe longer. Time is a blur when you stop sleeping. At first, it was just little things, waking up in the middle of the night for no reason, hearing creaks and whispers that I brushed off as the house settling. But then it got worse. Much worse. It began with the knocking. It always started at exactly 3:03 a.m. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on my bedroom door. I live alone. The first time it happened, I sat up in bed, my breath caught in my throat. I stared at the door, the darkness beyond it pressing in. My heart hammered in my chest. I told myself I was imagining it. The house was old, maybe the pipes were knocking. But then it happened again. 3 knocks. Always 3. Always at 3:03. I got up once, flicked on the light, and yanked open the door, expecting to find, I don't know, someone. Something? But the hallway was empty. Just the cold, stale air of my home greeting me with silence. I stopped opening the door after the 3rd night. Instead, I started lying in bed, paralyzed, my ears straining for any other sounds. The knocking became more insistent, harder. One night, I swear I saw the doorknob twist. Then the whispering began. At first, it was faint, just a hushed voice I couldn't quite make out. But it got clearer every night. It came from inside my room. A voice rasping my name from the foot of my bed. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I tried to convince myself I was dreaming, trapped in some kind of waking nightmare. But I wasn't. The next morning, my sheets were twisted as if someone, or something, had crawled onto the bed with me. I started leaving all the lights on. I bought cameras, desperate to catch whatever was tormenting me. But the footage showed nothing. Only me, sleeping fitfully, thrashing in terror as the knocking continued, as the whispers grew closer. I called a priest. He blessed the house, muttered prayers, sprinkled holy water in every room. The first night afterward, the silence was deafening. No knocking. No whispering. I thought it was over. Then, at 3:03 a.m., my bedroom door opened. Not with a creak, not slowly, no, it slammed open, as if something had been waiting, lurking. The lights flickered and went out. The whispering returned, closer, louder. I could hear it breathing. I didn't sleep at all that night. Or the next. Or the one after that. I tried leaving my house, staying at a hotel, but it didn't help. The knocking followed me. The whispers slithered through the walls, through the floors, curling into my ears, burrowing into my mind. Then came the shadows. I started seeing movement in the corners of my vision. Dark figures, shifting in the periphery, gone the moment I turned to face them. They grew bolder, creeping closer. One night, I woke to find a silhouette standing at the foot of my bed, featureless, just a void of darkness in human shape. I wanted to scream, but my throat locked up. I could only stare as it loomed over me, its breath cold against my face. I must have passed out, because the next thing I remember was daylight creeping through the blinds. I convinced myself it had been sleep paralysis. But the bruises on my arms told me otherwise. The knocking became pounding. The whispers became screams. My walls trembled as if the house itself was trying to contain whatever lurked inside. Then came the scratching. Soft at first, like fingernails against the wood. Then deeper, more frantic. The sound clawed at my sanity, growing more urgent every night. The walls bore the marks of something desperate to break through. I tried to leave town. Drove for hours, checking into a distant motel, thinking I had finally escaped. That night, at exactly 3:03 a.m., the hotel door shuttered. 3 knocks. The air turned frigid. The whispers seeped in through the vents. I ran to the bathroom, barricading myself inside, but the voice followed, pressing against my mind, repeating my name, over and over and over. When I returned home, exhausted, broken, I found something waiting for me. My walls were covered in symbols, scrawled in a language I couldn't understand. They pulsed when I looked at them, as if they were alive. My reflection in the mirror didn't match my movements. My phone played recordings of my own voice whispering secrets I had never spoken. And then, the knocking stopped. For days, I heard nothing. I felt nothing. The absence of sound was somehow worse than the torment. I let myself hope that it was over. I even managed to sleep. Then last night, I woke up to find myself standing in the middle of my room. My body moved without my control. My hand reached for the doorknob. I tried to resist, to pull away, but I couldn't. Some force guided me, compelled me. The door opened. Darkness stared back at me. It wasn't the hallway. It was something deeper, vaster, infinite. And within that black void, something waited. It reached for me. I don't remember what happened after that. But I woke up outside this morning, standing barefoot in the snow, miles from my house. My arms were covered in scratches, my hands smeared with something dark. I don't know how much longer I can fight this. I haven't slept in weeks now. My body aches, my mind is unraveling. And I can feel it watching me. Always watching. Just now, as I'm writing this, I heard it. 3 knocks. It's inside the room this time.